Good afternoon, everybody. So, as we know, winter is here, fall is here, which means sleeves, jackets, coats. That being said, if you find yourself in a self-defense situation, these are a couple techniques that you can utilize the long sleeves and the collars of a jacket or a coat. The first one is a 7E5EE18D, nagi, or single shoulder throw. It's performed as so. So I get a grip on my opponent's collar and his sleeve. I can go over his forearm, or I can go under his elbow, or I can even come in here. I prefer a tighter grip, so I get more posture, I get more control for my opponent. I also want him to get up on his toes and get off balance. To do this, I can simply give a little push from the collar. So once he's off balance, I keep this tight, and I take this arm, and I want to get my shoulder under the armpit. Once I do that, to do that, I'm going to have to step. I'm going to have to step over his foot. As I do that, I bump his hip with my hip. This puts him further off balance, and it gets my leverage underneath his. As I do this, I'm going to raise up, and I'm going to turn, keeping his shoulder, keeping a grip on his shoulder. The second technique is a haraigoshi, or the reaping leg throw. To perform this technique, I want to perform the same grip, one on the collar and one on the arm. To perform this, I want to get my opponent off balance, which I'm going to utilize the same push of his collar. From here, I'm going to pull his arm across my stomach, across my waist. As I pull his arm across my waist, I make sure to keep a tight grip under his elbow. Once I do that, I'll put my other arm around his neck, and I try to bring his head in.
I'm at the gym right now.
As I do this, I turn, and I take this leg, and I use a swinging motion to go across his thigh. The third technique is osotogari, or reaping leg trip. To perform this technique, I'm going to utilize the same grip. So with this, instead of going on this side of the collar, I want to go this side of the collar. So I'm gonna push up. I'm gonna push across. I'm gonna get my opponent's weight. I'm gonna get him off balance. So when I push across, I'm gonna step with my left leg. I'm gonna step with my left leg, and I'm gonna keep him in tight to me so he cannot step out. So at the same time, I'm gonna take my other leg, and I'm gonna swing it behind his leg, remembering to lift up this part of my opponent's collar. If me and my opponent both end up on the ground, I want to end up on top. If for whatever reason my opponent ends up on top of me, I want to perform a technique that's called a full guard. If I do not perform this technique, my opponent can inflict a lot of damage on me. I want to ensure to secure my opponent to make sure that he cannot sit fully up and attack. So whatever I can use to grab my opponent, his sleeves, his collar, in here, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna pull him in, and I'm gonna get what's known as a high guard. I want to get my calves across his middle and lower back and pull him in. I eventually want to achieve top position, In order to do this, I'm gonna do what's called a sweep. So to do this, I'm gonna give him just a little bit of posture, but I'm still gonna control this. So I'm gonna push him up a little bit, only to give myself enough space to get my shin across his waist. In a single motion, I'm gonna take this leg and I'm gonna reap like so, chop. I'm gonna chop this leg while I push this leg out. At the same time, I'll pull this arm in and I'll push out on his collar. The technique performed in one motion is like this. If I'm trying to perform a sweep and my opponent has a good defense and I can't get out of this bottom position, I can perform submissions. I can attack him from this position. The first one is going to be the arm bar. So to do this, I'm going to pull this arm across me and I'm going to push his head away. This is going to do two things. This is going to isolate his arm, and it's going to give me space to get my leg over his head. So I reach across, I pull his arm across my body, and I push his head away. Now I have clearance to get my leg around his head, and I have his arm secured. Once I do this, I already have his arm isolated here. Once I do this, I'm gonna make sure I keep him close to me, and I'm gonna put both hands on his arm, ensuring that his thumb is up. When I do this, I'm gonna roll back on the small of my back, and I'm gonna push my legs out. As I do this, I make sure that I keep him in. To do that, I pull into him with my calves. I keep my thighs pinched together, so that way his arm is more isolated. So in one motion, I'm gonna pull him in, I'm gonna pinch my thighs together, and I'm gonna pull down on his arm. The second attack that I'm gonna do from my back is a Kimura. So, once again, I'm trying to sweep my opponent. He reads it, he defends it, I can't sweep him. So what I'm gonna do, come around. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my left arm, and I'm gonna put my armpit over his tricep, back here by the elbow. Now when I do this, I'm keeping his shoulder into my chest. I'm taking my right hand and I'm putting it on his wrist. I already have my left hand here. I'm gonna hold my own forearm. I'm gonna hold my own forearm, I'm gonna pull him in close, and I'm gonna turn. As I turn, I push his arm straight back. What this does is this isolates his shoulder, and I have control of his body with my leg right here. I'm using both arms to attack his shoulder. I want to make sure that I keep him in close to me. I keep this arm clamped down tight, and I keep his shoulder into my chest. And I'm simply gonna push his arm back until there's no more resistance. His arm's been turned back as far as it could go, and if I want to, I could break his shoulder in that position. So I've demonstrated 3 techniques to bring my opponent to the ground. I demonstrated a sweep, and I demonstrated 2 attacks off my back for my opponent who's in the top position. Thank you for attending my demonstration of self-defense.